It's time to step into the Coming Out Lounge, a cool, safe space to be true to your sexual self. With your host, Rick Clemens. Rick has helped hundreds of people come out of the closet, and now each week he's bringing you cool insights for loving and accepting yourself, boosting your self-confidence, and living a guilt-free, purpose-filled life on the other side of the closet doors. Cuddle up with yourself and get ready for heartwarming coming out stories, ideas for living authentically, and tips for being fully self-expressed. Now here's your host, Coming Out Coach Rick.
Hello, Closet Busters. It's time once again to stop the closet dwelling and to step out, step up, and step into living your powerful truth. And today I want to start with a question. What if suddenly you woke up one day and you had no fear, there was no filter, and you really didn't want to be around any BS or negativity or toxic people or be wasting any more time not living your truth or following your dreams? Sounds pretty amazing, doesn't it? It probably sounds like a lot of what most of you that listen to this podcast are thinking. Man, I want to get out of this toxic place. But what if getting there required that you had to move halfway across the country, you ended up meeting the man of your dreams, and then you found yourself forced into a transition? The kind of transition that would require some really, truly deep-seated form of change in your life. In fact, this change would be so immeasurable painful, and it would make you feel guilt and confusion and anger and a feeling that no one would understand you. Now, are we starting to sound familiar to your journeys coming out of the closet? I bet we are. But now I want you to imagine that you had to confront the loss of your future, your past, and all that stuff that seemed to remain was this present that was just filled with pain, loss, and a reality of broken dreams. And there you stand, every sense of the word of knowing that your bottom just fell out of your life. Now, like many of you, my guest today has had those feelings, and she's gone through her own form of the darkness. But I can tell you this now, Nicole Keating, who is the founder of Art of Epic Wellness, is finding and continues to find her way back to joy. She lives by the mantra that, man, to the degree that you've suffered is to the degree you can feel joy, love, and hope. And she believes this all to be true. In fact, she also knows that when we take responsibility for our own healing, anything is possible. And that's why I wanted to bring her on today as a point of inspiration that when you're in the darkness, you can thrive. Welcome to the show, Nicole Keating.
Wow, that was a fantastic intro. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and thank you for being here. So I'm going to give the listeners a little backstory. We are both podcasters, and we met through a online group that we both belong to. We're actually part of John Lee Dumas's Entrepreneur on Fire Podcasters Paradise. But we didn't actually meet until a few weeks ago when we were at John's book launch for his journal that's coming out, the Freedom Journal. And I was so excited that we actually got to meet face to face.
I know, it's so cool. Like sometimes you recognize someone's voice before you recognize them. So it was really, really special to meet you and to have listened to your podcast before. And I think what you're doing is amazing. So I'm really grateful.
Right back at you. And it's interesting as podcasters, we listen to a lot of podcasts because we want to, up our game. We want to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing and want to make sure we're giving our listeners the best thing. So yes, we often recognize each other's voices, but then it's like, okay, now we got to put the voice with the face and all that stuff. And that evening was one of those beautiful evenings that we actually got to do that. And in the midst of that evening, we started having a pretty interesting conversation about coming out and the journey through pain and, coming to terms with what life so beautifully hands us so that we can grow through it. And I think I kind of set it up where we can kind of dive right into your story that brought you to this place of being of service in the way you are to the world. So take the listeners to that trek across the country with the guy that, you were coming to Mr. Man, so to speak, weren't you?
Yeah. It's interesting. At the time when I met this man, I was living in Miami, Florida, and I was kind of a wild card. I was bartending and kind of living the wild life a little bit. And I remember the night I met this man, he recognized something in me that he's like, you seem to really be an artist. Like, are you fulfilled? And I remember really just feeling like this guy got me. And we started dating, and it was a long distance thing at first, which usually that doesn't work out, but it can if it's the beginning of something really special, right? So that was this budding relationship, and I think he kind of completed me in the sense that he saw that I was not living my artful life. I was just kind of floating around and having fun in Miami, and this man kind of represented this other side of me that I really wanted to dig into. So I ended up moving out to Half Moon Bay, California, following my dreams, I guess, and I remember coming to California, back like maybe 5 or 10 years before, and loving it and knowing I was supposed to be there. And so it was pretty mystical that I met this man, and he kind of guided me out here.
Now that's really interesting to me, because it is mystical. I mean, you've said a couple of things already that before we get to the deeper story, this mystery of being open to what's possible is what I just heard. It's like, okay, here I am. I'm kind of doing my thing, and here Mr. Man walks in, and then he suddenly sees something in you that kind of sparked everything. I mean, the creativity, this artist, and then even, I would assume, this possibility of having a long distance relationship was probably the furthest thing from your mind at that time, right?
Oh yeah, totally. But
so I'm curious, because you brought it up, and I don't want it to be about the long distance relationship, but I can tell you this, Nicole, that a lot of the clients that I end up working with as a coming out coach tend to find themselves in long distance relationships. I don't know why, but they do. So what made it work for you? What was that long distance thing like that you could really make it work?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the promise of a promising future, like the potential of something untapped that, I could really, and I think sometimes people come into our lives as a mirror, and he was showing me this other side of myself that I hadn't explored before. And I mean, that probably your clients and listeners can relate to that.
Sure.
Is sometimes if we're hiding a part of ourselves. And actually, you just brought something up for me. I really was. I had something happen in college that had really been painful for me, kind of being taken advantage of by one of my bosses. And it was like it was somebody that worked at the bar I worked at. We were all friends, and I found myself in a situation where I woke up and someone had taken advantage of me, and it was something I actually didn't really recognize until recently that had shaped who I am. So for that period that I was kind of floating around, bartending, not really getting the most fulfillment out of my life, I was suffering because I wasn't really in a place where I was, that was a shameful experience for me, and it was something that really hurt me, and I hadn't really acknowledged it. So I think this man represented a mirror to this other side of myself that I wasn't exploring and I wasn't honoring. So I think that it was the promise and the potentiality there that kept me interested. And he was really kind of a magical person. Like he just observed life in a different way. And so for me, it was like I was surrounded by, now Miami's full of all kinds of people, but the life that I was leading there at the time was like, it was just a bunch of people that were really concerned with how they looked and they're, having money and going out. And it just did not feel fulfilling for me. And so he kind of represented something deeper. So I pursued it and ended up moving out, and he flew there and we drove across country together. Wow. And ended up in Half Moon Bay, and I totally started my life over with him.
That's so fascinating, because there's lots of parallels that are already showing up that I think because of how society has put this label on gays and lesbians as being, not good people, and they're abominations of God and all these sort of things. What we tend to do is something very similar to what you did, where we just kind of hide our shame around this in other ways by outwardly doing things that kind of keeps it away from the real truth of how we're feeling, and we go on and do different kinds of things. I know for me I did a lot of drinking, not like to the point of alcoholism, but I drank a lot. I hid behind food a lot, which kind of, we'll get to that in talking to you about what you do now. But this hiding thing that you brought up about, the being taken advantage of, it was a shame piece. And it's like, okay, I don't want anybody to really know this. And it's really similar. So take us now to the other side of the continent, so to speak. You're on the other side of the States. Mr. Man and you've driven across country, and now here you are in Half Moon Bay, California.
Yeah. So I did. We started our life over, and we had a lot of fun together. I mean, we traveled, and I was still kind of in that time of, I mean, we had a lot of wild times too. And he was like a rock and roll dude. Like, he played music. He had friends in every walk of life, and he took me on all these adventures, and we really did have a lot of fun. But really importantly in the story, he encouraged me to do my art. So really, he was the first person it was the first time that I actually explored the idea of actually selling my art and becoming an artist. So he really saw that in me and held up that mirror and honored me and encouraged me in that way. And so we had this passionate, tumultuous, beautiful relationship for 4 years, and then something happened that the bottom fell out on my life. So do you want me to go into that?
Just go for it.
Okay.
Yeah, we're right there. I don't want them going, okay, they keep taking us to the edge. They keep taking us to the edge. And then what happened? It was a pretty big moment for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And, it was like literally my whole life changed in an instant. So, he actually ended up having a heart attack at 39. And I was there. I was sleeping on the couch. Something woke me up, and it was like one of those sounds where you're like, I don't know what that is, but that doesn't sound right. Like, everything in my body just kind of, wrenched, and I ran into the bedroom, and I saw him. He was laying on the floor, and I ran over to him, and he was warm. So of course I, went right into action, and it's kind of a blur, but the whole 911, everything, they resuscitated him, and he was in a coma for 3 days. Now, he was not responsive. So I was, I had a lot of hope and we all had a lot of hope that he would come through it. But he was in a coma, and unfortunately he did not have oxygen for too long. So after 3 days of us, thinking it was going to be okay, potentially, that we got the news that it wasn't going to work out. So it was crazy, because nowhere in my mind and nowhere in my encyclopedia of possibilities was this a possibility for my life,
But this is interesting, because I think for a lot of people who are in the closet, who finally start to confront and come to the truth of who they are and their sexual orientation, this isn't part of their possibilities either. We kind of go through life going, okay, kind of get this, and it depends, I know for me, I knew by the time I was like 7 or 8 that there was something different about who I was. But to really come to the confrontation of the true possibilities, I was so far away from that. Even by the time I did my first coming out at age 19, I was still kind of like, I don't know if this really is. So I know my listeners can really relate to this. As you say, the possibilities were just, it wasn't in the cards. There was just no way you could see it, right?
No way. No, I mean, and I like, one of my friends at the time told me, she was a woman that I worked with. We worked with kids together, so she was kind of a mentor. And I remember she said to me, when you're in the forest, you can only see the trees around you. So whereas now looking back, I could see his health declining a little bit, if I think back on it. But at the time, I was the person that saw him every day. I would, I couldn't have imagined or seen it coming. But, it was like this insidious thing that was happening, and it was like the perfect storm was lining up. And really, I went through this shock and denial, literally the bottom fell out. Like, I didn't know how, I was going to stay in our house, cause he made a lot more money than me, and I paid, the portion I could pay. And there was no backup plan. Yeah. So, luckily I had some angels, or, I don't know if you call them angels, or just people that just were these amazing supporters that stepped up. I had somebody pay my rent. One of his friends paid my rent for a month so I could stay there. Talk about human compassion and kindness, right? I had, my family also did the same thing, just so I could have the proper grieving experience, because when you're in the middle of that, you get really crazy and attached to stuff. And even though, because you don't have the person. And so you're just, imagine you're falling down, a mountainside, and you're just trying to grab onto anything. That's how it feels in the beginning of losing someone. And I'm sure that the beginning of coming out probably feels so out of control too.
Very much so. Very much so. In fact, I think most of my clients would truly say, I need to be surrounded by angels and supporters in a time when I feel like I'm one giant snowball that just keeps, going down that mountain, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger because there's so many things going on in your mind. And I'm glad you brought up the angels and the people to support you, because oftentimes, whether it's the grief of losing someone you love, or it's the loss of a job, or you finally come to terms with you're going to say, I'm gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and that you, who you were, is no longer there. It's about finding that inner circle, and it can be really difficult to find that. And I think you're kind of showing that people will show up. You got to be open to it, and sometimes it's not going to be the people you most want to show up. But it'll be sometimes the people who most surprise you. So there you stand. You're on your own. You're feeling like literally like nobody gets you. And so kind of take us, how long did you stay in that space of feeling like this?
Wow. Gosh, it's I'm coming up on the 6-year mark now, February 8th. Well, it was like a 3-day ordeal, right? So the 7th, 8th, and 9th was kind of, and so I'm coming up on that. And I do feel like for the first time, I'm actually repurposing this date, and I'm going to be launching something. And I'm just like, it will always hurt, but it did take, I'd say I had a couple of moments where I had these big ahas. So the first one was probably about 3 or 4 months in. I had been managing a restaurant, I basically had this aha that I needed to do something that would mean something. I needed to make my life mean something. So that was kind of my first. I was in a really dark place, but I felt like because I had lost Mark, this could not happen in vain. Like, I had to make my life count, and I had to honor his life with my life, kind of thing. I had this kind of aha moment. Of course, I went through a very dark first year, but I started when the week before he passed away, I had gone for the first time to paint with a friend of mine, Lisette Lugo, an artist. We had gone to paint with Alzheimer's and dementia at a nursing home. And it was the first time I had done it. And he was so excited because I was so excited. I was like, I really feel like I'm doing something I'm meant to do. And he was so excited for me. And so when he passed away, I made a vow that I was going to try to create my own practice doing this. So that was the next phase, was like, I'm not going to do this restaurant thing anymore. I want to do something meaningful. So that first, year was me jumping off into that. And I remember I didn't know how I was going to do it because I didn't make enough money to really leave my job. So I made this mantra, and it was a double the money in half the time, double the money in half the time. So I put this mantra out there, and I was trying to bring that into my reality, because I had the saving grace for me was a friend of mine gifted me a CD of Wayne Dyer and Deepak Chopra, and it was so powerful. They're talking about manifesting your life. And I think this can apply to people listening, because you really, in my experience of the last 6 years, you absolutely can manifest the life of your dreams. You can. It starts with just opening your heart and believing that it's possible. So for me, that was huge. And then I was blessed to go see him about 10 months into my grieving journey in Maui. So I saw Wayne Dyer speak, and I'm so grateful for that, because he passed away this year.
Right.
That I got the chance to do that. So I ended up getting that job. It was a job at the Ritz-Carlton doing on-call banquet serving. So not only could I make double the money, in half the time I was on call, so I could literally say yes or no to any job, which was like a dream job at the time. So
I want to dive in here, because I think you're saying something that's so powerful here. Number one, the manifesting piece is huge, and it's really hard when you're down in the BS of what's going on to believe that you can bring yourself out of this. But this manifestation piece is so critical and so viable. If you can just baby step into, I believe I could do this. I don't know how I'm going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of the starting point. And when I talk with people one-on-one, this is one of the places I always start. If you could take one baby step towards believing you're going to be okay on the other side of the closet door, what would that be? Because that's the first piece of manifestation. You have to believe that you can even take that baby step to move forward. Mm-hmm. And then, as you said, the beautiful, open your heart and believe that it's possible. No matter how painful any of these transitions are, whether it's the loss of your boyfriend or you're coming out of the closet, if your heart is not open, it's going to take so much longer for you to be able to step out and do this. And as you were sharing the double your money in half the time, the first thing, as soon as you said those words, the first hit I had, the intuitive hit I had was, well, double your happiness in half the time. You know, you can go through these closet doors and make sure that, if nothing else, and I will say for me personally, when I was in the deepest, darkest moments of my whole coming out journey, when I thought I was going to lose my kids, when I thought I was going to be living on the street, when I was pretty certain I was going to lose my job, one of the things I did was I doubled down and said, but no matter what, I am going to find a way to be happy.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty much what you've kind of manifested in front of us here today is, you know, finding that way to get there. So you're doing all this work, you're working like a mad woman, you're open, your heart's open, you've rubbed shoulders with Wayne Dyer, and then it sounds like things begin to shift somewhere along the way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. After that, it's like high gear. Like I just felt like everything I was doing was in alignment with the serving this population. Mm-hmm. And then I did this for about 2 or so years. Then I started to have some health issues, which is where I transitioned to the art of epic wellness. So the thing about the grieving process, and actually this could really relate to your audience as well, is when you're grieving, you know, the loss of who you thought you were going to be, or you're, you know, coming out of the closet, it's very traumatic on the body. It can be, being in that state of stress. So that's what happened to me. And I ended up having this kind of health revolution. I was feeling better spiritually, feeling better emotionally. But physically, I was feeling like, I feel like I'm in an older body than I should be. I was in pain and I had some weird symptoms. So I started really digging into wellness, and I got the first thing I figured out was that I had mercury amalgams in my mouth that potentially could be causing some of my symptoms. I got those removed by a biological dentist, and immediately felt like something that didn't belong was fixed, like better. And I started seeing improvements, and then I started digging into food, and I realized I was sensitive to gluten. And so it was like this whole crazy flooding in of information and seeking, and it was really powerful, and it just kind of turned my ship again.
Well, in those moments, I remember, so you being a wellness coach, you're going to like probably reach through the microphones here and slap me. But when I was in the midst of, so I just started going through the separation and the divorce, and I did have a place to live. I ended up, it's kind of ironic because back to the manifesting piece, I'd always had wanted to live in Laguna Beach.
Yeah.
And ironically, my realtor took me out to like look for apartments, and she goes, I know you're probably going to say this isn't possible, but she goes, I want to take you and show you something. I'm like, okay. And so I live, you know, kind of Orange County area, inland, and get in her car and we start to head down towards the Laguna Beach, and I'm kind of looking at her like, are we going the right way? And she goes, oh, yeah. I said, I can't afford to live in Laguna Beach. And she goes, you know, don't, just go with me. Let's just go try this out, okay? Like, okay, whatever. And she took me to one place, and I'm like, definitely it wasn't going to work. It was beautiful. I mean, literally in the heart of Laguna Beach. My patio doors looked right out on Main Beach Laguna, right at the traffic and all that. I'm like, okay, beautiful. But it was like I could not have my 2 little kids in that place for anybody's business. So then we go to another place, and it was like, it's okay. It was a little more, I don't know, just wasn't my style, and it was definitely cramped. And she goes, okay, so we got one more to go look at. And we went, and it ended up being the place I ended up living. It was like this little fairy tale studio that just was perfect, and it had just enough room for me to have the kids and everything. but it didn't have anything but a cooktop stove. So like two little burners. That's it. I didn't have like an oven. I didn't have a dishwasher, which dishwasher was okay. It was like no big deal. And so when I didn't have the kids, I was like, man, I just eat whatever I felt like eating. Mm-hmm. But I was also under so much stress.
It's a comfort, right?
Yeah. Well, guess what I ended up living on most of the time?
Ramen noodles?
Yes, thank you. Exactly. Ramen noodles and wine. And I literally, for like a year, that was kind of my diet. And so to your point, I too started going, this isn't helping me, you know?
Yeah.
And I kind of have these weird binge eating moments where I've been eating ramen, and wine, go out to the bar and have wine. And then somebody'd say, let's go out to dinner. Well, we'd go out to dinner and I'd eat like a madman and then just be sick, you know, because my body wasn't used to it. It was like all of a sudden you're ingesting all this food that your body isn't used to. And so I'm sharing this, and I'm glad you shared it too, because in the moments of these stress, I know we all hear it, but really, really tune in and pay attention to what you're putting into your animal, into your beast, into your temple. It is so important. So suddenly here you go. You're starting to pay attention to this stuff, which kind of brings us, as you said, around to how you now became the queen of epic wellness, so to speak.
Well, first I want to acknowledge you for your vulnerability and sharing that, because I think it's so many people's stories is when they're stressed. I mean, I definitely had way too much wine myself during that period, and garbage in, garbage out. So those emotions that you're feeling, the sadness is just amplified by the garbage we're putting in our bodies. So and the best ways to get out, and something I've learned is one of the best ways to actually shift if you've been in a bad pattern, is to wake up and go and have a green juice. I'm telling you, there's something about it. It just, an organic green juice is a great fix. So yes. So then of course, the next part of my journey was the art of epic wellness. So I started getting really into personal development, and of course that's a lot of us just like can't get enough when we start to realize the power of it. And I was doing this therapeutic business, but I realized that as much as the art therapy was helping them, I knew that, wellness, nutrition would help so much more. And so I just really got focused on that. And I realized it was time to, again, make a leap. And so I had Hal Elrod was my first coach, which was really powerful because he was just getting the Miracle Morning book was getting so much traction, and his podcast was getting so much traction. And I was able to be, on the sidelines watching this going, wow. And I was trying to figure out what my medium was, and I knew I loved to talk and I love people. So I saw him doing the podcast, and it would seem like a natural fit for me. So I started the Art of Epic Wellness this last year, and I've been going 95 miles an hour ever since.
As we do when we're doing podcasting. It's like we just go, because we're not just doing podcasting, we're doing everything else we do on top of it. So, But I'm so glad you brought up Hal's name, because he happened to be there that night we were at the Freedom Journal launch. Yeah. And I have never even talked about Miracle Morning, but it would be actually a really powerful tool for anyone who's going through the closet doors to get a hold of his book, read it, and start setting into habits some of the stuff that he talks about, because it is so life-changing. I know it's had a huge impact on my life because now I'm kind of in my groove. I do my meditation, I get up and I do my walk, and then I have my little routine. Now, this isn't about just setting routines, folks. This is about really getting yourself in a space that says, oh, this is how I align myself with my day. Mm-hmm. Is it routine? Is it habitual? Yes. But it helps you find the thing that works for you. Isn't that what you kind of found, Nicole?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love it because, being an artist, of course, I'm like, this is working for me. And then but I do also believe that, like, as we transition, as we learn something new, as we start working on something new, there's other ways to up level. And I call it the art of epic wellness is the art of treating wellness as a practice. And I like to think of it as unburdening, which is removing those maybe toxins, or to stop giving energy to things that aren't working for you. And up leveling is adding in the good. So the Miracle Morning, of course, is an example of that. And I'm actually in the process of creating a course for helping people do that on a wellness level as well, setting their foundation with their rituals, but also adding in wellness practices and planning your food better, and up-leveling and unburdening your body care products, things that people don't think about.
Yep.
But I like to think of your body as it's your temple. And if you think of it like an epic well, like a well, right?
Yep.
And you're filling up, if you're filling up your well, that's the burden being filled up in your body. And when you start to have symptoms, it's when your well is like running over with burden. And so that's when you need to pay attention. Obviously, it'd be great if people could pay attention before they get those symptoms,
Sure.
but a lot of times people are already in trouble. So these are ways to remove the toxic burden and the toxic load and add in the good things that support your life. And really a lot of it, I'm also really big into like how people are creating their mission and their vision and their movement. And if we're in that toxic state, which, you know, the people listening to your show, I mean, it's so hard to be in that lower world, like the lower world of suffering, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so the supportive, complementary, foundational habits, rituals, and different types of up-level food that you can put in your body, like green juice or green smoothies or drinking lemon water in the morning. These are just a few of the ways that you can kind of remove some of that burden, so you can start to swim and get your head above water, right?
Absolutely. And I love that, so that you can start to swim and get your head above water, because in the depths of our grief or our changes or our big, deep life transitions, it's all we can do to keep our head above water. And, you know, as you were talking, something kind of struck me, and it's kind of poignant to this conversation. I happened to go to a friend's husband's funeral yesterday, and it was somewhat similar to your story. I mean, he and a girlfriend had gone out to dinner one night last week. He came home. Nobody was he couldn't hear anybody in the house. He heard the dog barking, and he went to the bathroom to see if the dog got locked in the bathroom. He couldn't get in the bathroom door. He tried to get in. He couldn't really get in. And when he finally pushed, basically what happened is he pushed his husband's body out of the way. His husband had a heart attack. And so very similar stories. So we went to the funeral yesterday. But something that I found interesting was we went to a really fabulous vegetarian restaurant in LA called Sage, and all vegetarian. There's no meat. It's all just beautiful vegan vegetarian food. And I'm not a vegetarian, but I do enjoy that kind of food.
Yeah, me too.
And I realized while we were sitting at the services how alive and awake I was, how aware of what I was experiencing in this, time of, sadness.
Yeah.
How I was able to really take things in. And I thought, I wonder if this has to do with that I just really just fueled my my animal. You say temple, I like to call it animal.
I like animal.
Well, Elizabeth Gilbert's the one who said that. I heard her on Oprah not too long ago, and she's like, I got to feed my animal. And when we feed our animals, because we're mammals, then we can make anything happen. But I also see it as a temple, too, because if you don't take care of it, and this is coming from an ex-smoker, people. So, yes, I know that feeling of not taking care of your temple. So I want to talk just really quickly about, so you've got some programs coming out. Tell us a couple of the programs you got coming out that might really help some of our listeners if they're like, okay, I really need to get on a better nutrition and wellness plan. What you got going?
Well, yeah, it's pretty cool. I like you also coach people, but that's one way. If somebody's like, I need help now and I just want to spend the day with you figuring out your life, because I've done that for my very first client has made huge changes and lost 15 pounds, and he's started his new movement that he's creating and stuff like that. So that's one thing. But what I'm really, really excited about is I'm creating the Epic Wellness Academy, which is I'm going to be doing taking a beta group through creating their foundational rituals and habits and learning how to source their food and how to plan their meals better and up-level and unburden their body care. And it's going to be rolling out over time, but this first group is going to be going through a month of accountability and support through changing those foundational habits. So I'm really excited because I really believe that this first part of it I need to be there to help them through that process.
Awesome.
So that I can create.
So cool. I love it.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff that Nicole is talking about, folks, is, you may be going, but I don't have time to think about this while I'm thinking about coming out. It's all part of the journey. And sometimes I think we get so focused on, okay, how am I going to say those words that I'm gay? Who am I going to talk to? Who's going to reject? But the thing is there's other stuff that if you started taking care of and having some outlets and taking care of you, which is always, as you know, if you listen to the podcast on a regular basis, step one is take care of you first. And this is part of what Nicole is really talking about. So we are just about out of time here, Nicole. And one of the things that I always like to bring to the close of the show is, this is the Coming Out Lounge. And I think every guest that comes on brings huge nuggets of wisdoms. And that's kind of weird to say huge nuggets. It's like an oxymoron, but that's my thing. But
I like it.
There's so many beautiful things that come out. But you've gone through your own coming out story of coming out and facing a loss of someone you really cared about. What would be some words of wisdoms you would leave with anyone who's going through transitions, coming out in their own way in life?
Wow. Well, I think the one thing that comes up that kept me kind of moving forward was moving through the experience, like allowing yourself, like for me, so you're probably going to have the same experience of like, there'll be places that you used to go that you don't feel comfortable going anymore, or, people that you're really uncomfortable with seeing. Like, I think it's important to kind of hold your head up and keep walking through your life, like keep meeting your life. Because for me, I know that like I had this opportunity to go back home and live with my parents. And I know deep in my heart, if I had done that, if I had gone back to Florida and given up on what I had already started, the spark of a life I had created here, like I would never have been the same. So I think it's important there'll be times where you want to be alone and you want to kind of wallow, and that's okay, but get back up and move through your life and be proud of who you are. Don't allow this experience to beat you down, because you will be better for it, because you will see the golden thread. You will see the silver lining. It just won't be right away. It might be hard, but it will come.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect place to kind of bring us full circle here. And you'll be able to get a hold of Nicole through the web pages for this show. But real quick, what's your web address, Nicole?
Thank you, Rick. It's www.theartofepicwellness.com, and my email is just Nicole at the same, Nicole, Nicole at theartofepicwellness.com.
Awesome.
You can reach me.
So this has been great, and if you have enjoyed anything that you've heard today, found some nuggets of wisdom in what Nicole shared and what I've been sharing, we always love it if you just hop on over to iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you're dialing us in to be a part of the Coming Out Lounge. Give us a rating and review, but please only do that if it's like really heartfelt and you felt like you got something from the show. And while you're at it, always feel free to hop over onto Facebook, join part of the Coming Out Coach family. And, of course, we always enjoy those little tweets that we get every so often about, oh, that show was really great, or Nicole gave me a really good idea about, putting some good fuel in my body, whatever it is. So my handle over on Twitter is @RickClemens, and the hashtag for the show is the Coming Out Lounge. And I'm also going to give you one shameful plug, because my book is coming out just a few weeks from the time that this show will air. It's like the biggest step I've taken in a while. It's called Frankly, My Dear, I'm Gay, A Late Bloomer's Guide to Coming Out, and it is slated to come out February 29th, for sure by the first week of March or second week of March. I'm waiting for my publisher, but I'd really enjoy sharing that with you, and we'll be doing a special show right before it comes out talking about the book. And with that, I think we're going to wrap it up, and as we always say, we're going to encourage you to get out there and never stop stepping out, stepping up, and stepping into living your powerful truth. I'm Rick Clemens, the Coming Out Coach, and you've been listening to the Coming Out Lounge, and we will see you in just another week. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.
You've just experienced the Coming Out Lounge. Go online to www.comingoutlounge.com to learn more, and tune in again next week for more stories and tips for being true to yourself.